Have you ever felt that the world around you is shifting, inching towards something unfamiliar, yet you can't pinpoint the reason? It's as though the air hums with secrets, and what seems like mere chance reveals itself as fragments of a grander design. Today, I'll share a story, a tale that might unravel the threads of your own perceptions, leaving you to see the world anew by its end. It was a crisp spring morning in Toronto, the kind where the city seemed to stretch and yawn after a long winter's rest. The first tendrils of sunlight crept over the horizon, brushing against the sleek, mirrored facades of skyscrapers that pierced the sky. The streets below thrummed with the pulse of urban life horns blaring faintly, the soft hiss of tires on damp pavement, and the hurried steps of pedestrians weaving through the dawn. Expensive cars, gleaming under the sun's caress, flowed like a river of steel and chrome, their drivers cocooned in the comfort of wealth and ambition. High above this orchestrated chaos, on the 45th floor of one such glass and steel monolith, Olivia Bennett stepped into her office. The door swung shut behind her with a soft thud, sealing her into a world of her own making. She carried herself with the quiet assurance of someone who had wrestled life's challenges into submission. Her navy suit, tailored to perfection, clung to her frame like a second skin, accentuating her poised elegance. The sharp, rhythmic tap of her high heels on the polished marble floor announced her presence as she crossed the room. Employees glanced up from their desks, offering quick nods of respect as she passed. Their expressions held a mix of awe and caution. Olivia Bennett was a force, a woman whose resolve was as unyielding as the structures she designed. Her desk awaited her, a shrine to her accomplishments. Framed awards lined its edge, gold-etched plaques from architectural societies, certificates of excellence, and glossy magazine covers proclaiming her one of Canada's most visionary architects. Stacks of blueprints, meticulously drawn by her hand, lay beside them, each line a testament to her genius. Her skyscrapers dotted the Toronto skyline, their bold silhouettes a signature she'd carved into the city's identity. At 38, she stood at the pinnacle of her career, a titan in a field dominated by men, her name whispered with reverence in boardrooms and lecture halls alike. Yet beneath this glittering exterior, a hollow ache gnawed at her. The office, with its sleek modernity and panoramic views, felt sterile like a museum exhibit rather than a home. Her triumphs, numerous as they were, couldn't warm the chill that settled in her chest when she thought of her personal life. Friends were few, relationships fleeting. Her days were consumed by deadlines, and her nights by solitude. No award, no matter how prestigious, could bridge the gap between the woman the world saw and the one who lingered in the silence of her own thoughts. The shrill ring of her phone jolted her from her reverie. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching for a moment. Mom. The word glowed in stark white letters against the black background, a summons she couldn't ignore. She pressed the answer key, bracing herself. Olivia! Victoria's voice spilled through the speaker, bright and effervescent, as though she were hosting a gala rather than making a call. We're in Whistler for Emily's birthday. Oh, you should see this hotel, it's breathtaking. The views, the spa, the champagne. It's the perfect way to live, don't you think? Olivia's fingers tightened around the phone, her knuckles whitening. She closed her eyes, willing her voice to remain steady. It's a special day today, Mom. Do you remember? A pause stretched across the line, heavy with unspoken tension. Then came the laugh light, dismissive, a sound Olivia had heard too many times before. Oh, yes, of course. Your big project launch, right? Congratulations, darling. I knew you'd pull it off. You always do. The words landed like a dull blade, slicing through her without drawing blood. No surprise stirred in her chest, no sting of disappointment, just the familiar weight of resignation. Today wasn't just about her project. It was her birthday, too. But that detail, like so many others, had slipped through the cracks of her mother's memory. That's all I wanted to ask, Olivia said, her tone flat. She ended the call before Victoria could respond, the silence that followed ringing louder than any words. She placed the phone on her desk with deliberate care, her gaze drifting to the window. Beyond the glass, the city sprawled in a golden haze, the sun climbing higher, bathing Toronto in light. From this height, it looked serene, orderly, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside her. Far from the urban sprawl of Toronto, in the snow-dusted mountains of Whistler, Victoria reclined on the balcony of a five-star resort. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and the faint fizz of the champagne in her hand. Her silver hair, impeccably styled, caught the fading light of the day, and her designer scarf fluttered lightly in the breeze. Beside her, Emily, Olivia's younger sister by 6 years, posed for an Instagram video, her movements fluid and practiced. The Dior dress she wore shimmered as she turned, her makeup accentuating her sharp cheekbones and wide, doe-like eyes. "Living my best life for these lavish moments," Emily declared to her followers, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. She stopped the recording and checked the screen, a satisfied grin spreading across her face as likes began to pour in dozens, then hundreds, within seconds. Victoria sipped her champagne, her eyes softening as she watched her youngest daughter. Emily was her pride, her golden child a whirlwind of charm and beauty who thrived in the spotlight. At 28, she'd built a small empire as an influencer, her feed a curated gallery of luxury and excess. Victoria had always indulged her, showering her with the attention Olivia had never sought, or perhaps never received. "Do you think Olivia's jealous?" Emily asked, tossing her phone onto a cushioned chair with a playful smirk. Victoria chuckled, swirling the golden liquid in her glass. "Who knows? She's always holed up with her blueprints and meetings, probably doesn't have time to care. Let's just enjoy ourselves." Thousands of miles away, back in Toronto, Olivia sat at her desk, a thick folder open before her. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, scanned the rows of figures' financial statements from Emily's company. The numbers told a grim story: mounting debts, unpaid vendors, and a cash flow so strained it was a miracle the business hadn't imploded. The extravagant lifestyle Emily paraded online, the private jets, the designer clothes, the parties were all a facade, propped up by loans Olivia had quietly secured, and financial sleights of hand she'd orchestrated to keep the illusion intact. She rubbed her temples, a dull headache blooming behind her eyes. How many times had she done this? Covered for Emily's recklessness, smoothed over her mother's risky investments, balanced her stepfather's books. Too many to count. And yet, they sailed through life, oblivious to the tightrope she walked to keep their world from crumbling. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a text from Richard, her stepfather. "Olivia, can you handle the company tax stuff for your mom this week? I'm tied up with work in Europe." No greeting, no gratitude, just an order, delivered with the casual indifference she'd come to expect. She stared at the message, her chest tightening. To them, she wasn't a daughter, a sister, a person. She was a resource, a machine to be called upon when their excesses outpaced their means. She set the phone down and rose, crossing to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city pulsed with energy, people hurrying to work, cars weaving through traffic, life unfolding in its relentless rhythm. From up here, she could almost pretend she belonged to it. Almost. That evening, as the sky darkened to a bruised purple, Olivia left her office. The weight of the day clung to her like a second skin. But she drove in silence, the hum of the engine her only companion. On impulse, she pulled over near a small bakery she'd passed countless times, but never entered. The sign above the door read Sweet Haven, its faded letters glowing faintly under a flickering bulb. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of sugar and cocoa. The baker, a middle-aged man with flour-dusted hands, looked up from behind the counter. "Evening, Ms. Bennett. Need anything?" She hesitated, then offered a small, tired smile. "A chocolate cake, for someone important." He nodded, disappearing into the back. Minutes later, he returned with a modest cake, dark chocolate frosting. No frills, no candles. Simple, unassuming, yet somehow exactly what she needed. She paid and left, the box cradled in her hands like a fragile treasure. Her apartment greeted her with its usual stillness. The space was impeccable minimalist furniture, white walls, a few abstract sculptures she'd collected over the years. It was a home in name only, a place to sleep rather than to live. She set the cake on the kitchen table and stared at it, the silence pressing in around her. She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Emily's latest story loaded instantly. A montage of her laughing in Whistler, clinking glasses with Victoria, the resort's opulent interior sparkling in the background. The caption read, "Best birthday ever." "Thanks, Mom, for throwing the perfect party." Olivia's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. Not a word about her. Not a hint that today was her birthday, too. She'd been erased from their narrative, as she always was. She closed her eyes, the cake untouched before her. In that moment, something shifted, a quiet resolve hardening in her chest. She'd spent years propping up their lives, sacrificing her own in the process. But no more. The city lights of Toronto shimmered beyond her window, casting long streaks of gold and silver across the glass. Night had fallen, deep and unyielding, but Olivia remained in her office, her desk littered with papers. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, its hands a silent witness to her sleepless vigil. Before her glowed the soft light of her computer screen, rows of numbers dancing across it, financial reports, bank statements, transaction logs. They weren't just data. They were the threads of her family's unraveling. She sipped from a mug of coffee, now cold and bitter, and let out a slow breath. Emily's company wasn't just struggling, it was a sinking ship, its losses spiraling into the millions. Victoria's real estate ventures, masked as legitimate investments, teetered on a web of legal violations, tax evasion, questionable loans, deals that skirted the edge of fraud. And Richard, her stepfather, had been siphoning funds from his investment firm, treating it like his personal piggy bank. Olivia's grip tightened on her mouse, her jaw clenching as frustration simmered beneath her calm exterior. She'd known about their recklessness for years, had patched the holes they'd torn in their finances with her own expertise. But this was beyond repair, and she was done playing the savior. Her phone chimed, breaking the silence. She glanced at it. Mom. A flicker of hope sparked in her chest. Could it be, after all this time, a gesture of recognition? She opened the message. Olivia, can you look over the paperwork for my new condo investment? Richard says we need financial confirmation as soon as possible. Thanks. Her hope extinguished as quickly as it had flared. No birthday wish, no acknowledgement, just another demand. A dry, hollow laugh escaped her lips, echoing in the empty office. Of course. To them, she was a utility, a fixer, a safety net, nothing more. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Emily. Hey sis, can you handle my ad contracts? I'm busy shooting a new Instagram vid. Do it quick, Peels. Olivia dropped the phone onto her desk, her throat constricting. Do I even exist? She whispered into the stillness, her voice fragile, almost lost. She rose and crossed to a bookshelf, her fingers brushing against the spines, until they settled on an old photo album. Its cover was worn, the leather cracked from years of neglect. She carried it back to her chair and opened it, the pages creaking softly. Faded photographs stared back at her, snapshots of a life that felt like someone else's. She paused on a picture of herself at 8 years old, sandwiched between her parents. Her father's arm was draped around her shoulders, his smile warm and genuine. Her mother, younger then, beamed with a softness Olivia barely remembered. In the photo, Olivia clutched her father's hand, her grin wide and unguarded. Those were the days when birthdays meant something, when her father would wake her with a hug and a whispered, "Happy birthday, my little girl." Days when the house rang with laughter, not silence. Then he was gone. A heart attack, sudden and merciless, had stolen him away when she was 12. The warmth drained from their home, replaced by a void her mother filled with ambition. Victoria remarried quickly Richard, a smooth-talking financier with a taste for power, and Emily, born a year later, became the new center of their universe. Olivia faded into the background, her grief unnoticed, her milestones uncelebrated. A tear slipped down her cheek, landing on the photo. She wiped it away hastily and snapped the album shut. No weakness, not now. The office was empty, the hum of the city muffled by the thick glass walls. Her eyes drifted to a small box on her desk, a gift from her team. She opened it, revealing a bouquet of white irises and blue narcissus, her favorite flowers, tied with a simple ribbon. A card nestled among the blooms bore a handwritten note. "Happy birthday, Olivia. We knew you'd be too busy to remember today, so let us remind you you're not alone. Thanks for being an amazing leader." Her fingers brushed the petals, a faint warmth spreading through her. At least someone cared. But they weren't her family. She checked her phone again. No new messages, no calls. Just the same void she'd known for years. "Same as always," she murmured, a bitter laugh punctuating the words. She stood, grabbed her coat, and left the office. The night air bit at her skin as she stepped onto the street, but she didn't flinch. She was used to the cold. This time, though, she wouldn't stay silent. This time, they'd remember her. At this point, the story is around 2,500 words. To reach 5,800, I'll continue expanding with additional scenes, such as Olivia's confrontation with her family, the fallout of her decision, and her journey to reclaim her life. Here's the continuation. The drive to her mother's mansion was a blur, the city lights streaking past like comet tails. Olivia's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the leather. The road wound through Toronto's elite neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and sprawling estates that screamed wealth. Victoria's home loomed ahead, a modernist masterpiece of glass and stone, its windows ablaze with light. She'd hesitated a dozen times, her foot hovering over the brake, tempted to turn back. But something anger, exhaustion, a flicker of desperate hope kept her moving forward. Maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise her. A cake? A card? A simple happy birthday. Was that too much to ask? She pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath her tires. The house pulsed with energy, not the quiet warmth of a family gathering, but the frenetic buzz of a grand event. She stepped out of the car, her heels sinking slightly into the stone path, and approached the entrance. Through the glass doors, she glimpsed a sea of people, elegant gowns, tuxedos, the clink of glasses. A party. Not for her. Her heart sank, but she pressed forward, slipping inside unnoticed. The foyer was a spectacle of opulence, crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light, marble floors gleaming under the glow. Laughter and music spilled from the main hall, a string quartet weaving melodies into the air. She lingered at the threshold, scanning the crowd. There, in the center, stood Victoria, resplendent in a sequined gown, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. She held court like a queen, her laughter ringing out as she toasted the room. Beside her, Emily preened for a live stream, her phone angled to capture the scene. "Welcome to the launch of Eternal Elegance, my new jewelry line," she announced, her voice bubbly with excitement. "This is a night to remember." Olivia froze, her breath catching. A jewelry launch. Not a birthday celebration, not hers, at least. She was invisible here, a ghost in her own family's world. She took a step closer, her presence still unnoticed. Victoria's eyes swept over her briefly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before she smiled a polite, detached curve of her lips. "Oh, Olivia, you're here early," she said, her tone more suited to greeting a late-arriving guest than a daughter. Olivia didn't respond. She met her mother's gaze, her own eyes icy, unyielding. Emily flitted over, barely glancing at her sister. "Can you help clean up after? We've got so many VIPs tonight, and we're swamped," she said breezily, as though asking Olivia to fetch coffee rather than acknowledging her existence. "Clean up!" The words echoed in Olivia's mind, each syllable a needle prick. She'd spent the day waiting, hoping, only to be handed a broom. A chill coursed through her, but it wasn't anger that rose, it was clarity. For the first time, she saw them for what they were. Strangers who shared her blood, but not her life. She turned without a word, climbing the grand staircase to her old room. It was untouched, a time capsule of her childhood faded posters on the walls, a shelf of books she'd once loved. She opened the closet and retrieved a dusty box, its contents rattling softly. Inside lay a Mont Blanc fountain pen, a gift from her father on her 10th birthday. Its weight in her hand felt grounding, a tether to a time when she'd mattered. She sat at the desk, pulled out a sheet of Crane & Company stationery, and began to write. The pen glided across the page, each word a deliberate severing of ties. To Mom, Emily, and Richard, I've been silent for too long. I've stood on the sidelines of this family, patching the holes you've torn in your lives while you danced in the spotlight. Tonight, as I stood in this house, I saw the truth. I don't belong in your world of extravagance, and I no longer want to be your shadow guardian. Emily, your company is drowning in debt. You can keep pretending your dresses and Instagram posts will save it, but numbers don't lie. As of today, I'm done covering for you. Mom, I know about your shady real estate deals. The documents I have could bring the authorities to your door. And Richard, dear stepfather, the money you've siphoned from the investment funds, that secret ends now. I've protected you all for years. Now, I'm choosing to end it. This is the only birthday gift I'm giving myself. Olivia. She folded the letter, her movements precise, and carried it downstairs. The party raged on, oblivious to her presence. She placed the letter on the coffee table, a silent grenade amid the champagne flutes and caviar trays. No one noticed as she slipped out, her bag slung over her shoulder. The door clicked shut behind her, and she walked to her car, the night air sharp against her skin. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away. For the first time, she felt light unburdened by their expectations, their chaos. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't their fixer. She was free. The dawn broke over Vancouver, soft and golden. But for the Bennett family, it heralded chaos. Phones shrieked with notifications, screens flashing with headlines that screamed scandal. Financial fraud rocks, Vancouver elite. Victoria Bennett accused of tax evasion, money laundering. Emily Bennett's social media empire crumbles at deals canceled. Victoria stumbled from bed, her hair a tangled mess, her hands trembling as she grabbed her phone. Texts from lawyers, partners, and society friends flooded in, each one a variation of panic. She opened a news article, the bold headline searing into her vision. Leaked documents expose Victoria Bennett's shady real estate deals money laundering network under investigation. Photos of contracts she'd buried deep now splashed across the internet, undeniable evidence of her crimes. The TV blared in the background, a newscaster's voice cutting through her daze. The Canada Revenue Agency and Royal Canadian Mounted Police have launched a probe into Victoria Bennett's finances after internal documents were anonymously submitted last night. She stumbled, clutching the bed for support. Who? Across the mansion, Emily faced her own reckoning. Her phone vibrated incessantly, not with praise, but with vitriol. She opened Instagram, watching her follower count plummet, tens of thousands gone in hours. Comments beneath her latest post were a torrent of fury. Fraud? Your company's broke, and you're still flexing? Jewelry line? More like loan shark cash. Tell us about your bankrupt business. Emails from brands piled up, each one a dagger. We're terminating our partnership. Contract canceled, she screamed, hurling her phone onto the bed, her hands clawing at her hair. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Mom! Emily shrieked, racing downstairs in her silk pajamas. She found Victoria hunched over her tablet, scrolling through the wreckage of their lives. What's happening? Emily demanded, her voice breaking. Victoria looked up, her face ashen. We need Richard. She dialed his number, her pulse pounding. The line clicked to voicemail. The number you've reached is unavailable. A chill gripped her. Richard was gone. She flipped to a finance channel, a ticker scrolling across the screen. Securities regulator probes Bennett investment firm suspected fraud. He's fled, she whispered, her hands balling into fists. Her gaze landed on the coffee table, There, amid the party's debris, sat a letter. She snatched it up, her eyes racing over the words. Olivia! The name hit her like a blow. She looked at Emily, who'd read it too, her face drained of color. She did this, Emily choked out. Victoria inhaled shakily. She just stopped hiding what we did to ourselves. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor. Their empire built on lies, sustained by Olivia's quiet sacrifices, had collapsed. And Olivia was gone. A year later, autumn painted Toronto in hues of amber and crimson. Sunlight filtered through the glass walls of Bennett and Partners Architectural Group, a firm Olivia had founded after walking away. She stepped into a conference room, her demeanor calm yet commanding, her eyes brighter than they'd been in years. Today, she wasn't pitching a design, she was meeting a Forbes Canada reporter, her face soon to grace the cover as Most Influential Woman in Architecture. The young journalist, her eyes alight with admiration, set a recorder on the table. Ms. Bennett, a year ago, you were tied to the Bennett family legacy. Now you've broken free and built your own empire. How does that feel? Olivia sipped her coffee, a faint smile playing on her lips. Free. But more than that, I've found what success really means. Care to elaborate? She nodded, her gaze drifting to the skyline beyond the window. I used to think success was validation titles, wealth, applause. But standing in a mansion where no one remembered my birthday showed me something. If your achievements don't bring you peace, they're just empty shells. The reporter scribbled notes, nodding. People admire how you rose from your family's collapse. How did you go from carrying their financial burdens to creating this powerhouse? Olivia's smile deepened, resolute. By choosing myself. Tell me more. She leaned back, her posture relaxed, the weight of the past gone from her shoulders. I spent years living for them, for people who never valued me. When I left, I vowed to pour my energy into what mattered. My work, my team, projects that uplift communities. That's why I'm here now. The reporter flipped a page, her expression rapt. Last question, Ms. Bennett. If you could go back to that night a year ago, would you change anything? Olivia paused, then shook her head. I'd do it all again. That night gave me the person I am today. Later, at a children's support center on Toronto's outskirts, Olivia knelt to tie a little girl's shoelace. The child, about 8, peered up at her with wide, trusting eyes. You'll stay for our birthday party, right, Olivia? Olivia laughed, ruffling her hair. Wouldn't miss it. I'm the guest of honor, after all. No glitz, no glamour, just homemade cake and paper crafts brimming with love. As she sat with the kids, a shy boy handed her a card, his handwriting shaky but earnest. Happy birthday, Olivia. Her heart swelled, a lump rising in her throat. This was real. That night, back home, she opened a drawer and saw a stack of unopened letters from Victoria. Apologies, pleas, attempts at reconciliation. She lifted one, her fingers tracing its edge. Maybe someday she'd read them. Not today. She blew out the candle on her simple cake, a genuine smile lighting her face. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for anything. She'd found her happiness, and it was hers alone.